What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Tricky Jim. Going to be showing off a brand new deck from next format. This is post-rotation Rayquaza GX. Super stoked about this. I've got a couple different versions of this deck in the works right now. This is just the big basic version. Now, from the current standard format, this deck does lose quite a bit. It loses Max Elixir. It also loses Parallel, both of which are really big for this deck. But I think the big basic version stays relevant heading into next format. You can still play it without evolution cards like Vikavolt. You can still get by with just your Rayquaza GXs. We've got a little bit of a workaround in this list where we play Energy Switch and also Super Scoop Up. In tandem, you can Energy Switch off of Rayquazas that you have used your Stormy Winds ability on and kind of consolidate your energy on just a couple of Rayquazas, and then just Super Scoop Up and reuse your ability. Also, Super Scoop Up's a nice healing card, allows you to have some mobility in the deck as well. This is just a list that I'm trying out right now, and it's definitely interesting, so I wanted to show it off to you guys on here on Tricky Jim. I've also got a version of this deck that does incorporate Vikavolt into it, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to be showing that off later this week as well. It's just still in the works. I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting all the pieces working together just right, but I am pretty confident with this version of the list that we have here. Start things off with 4 copies of Rayquaza GX, 1 copy of Latias, 2 copies of Tapu Lele GX, and 1 copy of Rangaroo. And that's it for the Pokemon. Very simple Pokemon cast, and this makes me really excited. Just so simple, just a big basic deck, very, very consistent, right? We don't need to rely on setting up any sort of evolution cards. This deck just works beautifully, just like this, right? You use your Rayquaza GX as your main attacker and also as a great setup Pokemon with that Tempest GX ability. You can power up huge Dragon Break attacks by the end of the game, often hitting for anywhere between 210 and upwards of 300 damage. Tapu Lele GX is searchable with that Mysterious Treasure item card, which is incredible. And Rangaroo allows you to kind of just keep churning through your deck, even on turns where you might not have a supporter card. We took a lot of hits as far as the supporter options for the Sun and Moon on format as well. So having a Rangaroo not only to instruct, but also to psychic as a valid attacker against those Hoopa decks as well. Rayquaza GX's Stormy Winds ability is notoriously destructive, discarding the top 3 cards of your deck. If you would like to attempt to accelerate an energy from the discard pile to your Rayquaza GX. But we do have this Latias here, which comes in excellently to accelerate energy with its attack. It accelerates an energy to each of your benched basic dragon Pokemon. So this thing is absolutely essential in the Sun and Moon on version of the deck. There are some games in the current standard format, the Worlds format, where you don't actually need Latias. I'm willing to say you pretty much need Latias in every single game that this current modern Sun and Moon on Rayquaza GX deck plays. You're just going to need to take a turn to recharge, whether it be early or later in the game after a Rayquaza GX has gone down. Taking a turn to recharge with Latias is absolutely essential. So a lot of times you're going to want to search out the Latias before you actually start using your Stormy Winds ability, because if you happen to mill your Latias, you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble here. So this is it for the Pokemon. I'm pretty confident in this as far as just a big basic Rayquaza GX deck. It's worked out well for me so far. So this is what I'm rocking with on the Pokemon front. Moving on to the supporters, we have 4 copies of Cynthia. We have 4 copies of Guzma, 2 copies of Lily, and 1 copy of Judge. Not a ton of supporters, actually. It's pretty light On the supporter side, we play 4 copies of Cynthia and 4 copies of Guzma because these are the cards that are going to keep us kind of maneuvering throughout the course of the game. Rayquaza really likes to take big one-hit knockouts. Guzma is a great card for that. Rayquaza also has a fat retreat cost of 3. So Guzma helps us to kind of negate that retreat cost and have some mobility in the deck, while not having to ever pay Rayquaza GX's retreat cost. Goodness, we never really want to do that. Lily is an excellent turn 1 option for this deck with 3 copies of Ultra Ball and 4 copies of Mysterious Treasure. We often have access to a turn 1 Tapu Lele, which can go get us a turn 1 Lily. Starting off by drawing 8 cards is very powerful. Now, I've had a lot of players ask me, why Judge, right? Because Judge seems kind of weak in a deck that wants to go up early. Hand Disruption is just always very good. And I think 1 copy of Judge would be silly not to include in almost every deck in the Sun and Moon On format. In fact, I think many decks will be playing more than 1 copy of Judge. This deck is playing 1 copy, and we do have Pal Pad to shuffle 2 of our supporters back into the deck throughout the course of the game, though I usually end up milling my Pal Pad just because it ends up biting the dust. But I do like Pal Pad as an option when you do get to play it. It's almost always very good. Judge is a great option for limiting your opponent's hand at the end of the game. They may have just a huge hand. You know they have win in hand, and Judge can at least give you a chance to try and strip that win away from them with a little bit of hand limitation. Also, Judge can be very good on the first turn of the game, especially if you're playing against a deck like a setup deck, like maybe Metagross, or maybe against Gardevoir GX. You could Judge, limit your opponent, and then Tempest yourself to draw a lot more cards. So I do really like Judge in this deck. Maybe not as a like a 3 of or a 4 of, but as a 1 or a 2 of, I definitely like it. On to the items, of which we play a lot. We play 4 copies of Mysterious Treasure and 3 copies of Ultra Ball. Everybody in this deck is searchable with Mysterious Treasure, except for Oranguru. We play 3 copies of Ultra Ball because really getting your Rayquazas into play is the most important part of this deck. Really, it's very important. We also play 3 copies of Choice Band, and honestly, I could see a 4th just because the damage modification is so key in this list, since we don't really have Max Elixir or any other way to enhance our damage output. So Choice Band is a must-have most of the time. So I could see playing a 4th copy of that. We also play 4 copies of Energy Switch. Energy Switch is very good in this deck so that we could accelerate with Stormy Winds, Energy Switch off the Rayquaza, put it onto a Rayquaza that we're trying to attack with, right? But after you do that, your Rayquaza GX is going to be left with no energy on it, which is a lot of times feels like a waste. So for that, we have Super Scoop Up, and we play 3 copies of Super Scoop Up, which can allow us to reuse that Rayquaza GX's Stormy Winds ability. You don't always get to pull this combo off, but when you do pull the combo off, it is very strong. Super Scoop Up also allows you to reuse your Tapu Lele GX's Wonder Tag ability, which can also be very good. We play 3 copies of Acrobike, which help us get energy into the discard quickly and also help us to just be a little bit more aggressive and search out more of our deck. We play 2 copies of Rescue Stretcher in order to get our Pokemon back. A lot of times, a game can hinge on whether or not you are able to get your Rayquazas back from the discard pile or whether or not you're able to get your Rayquazas out of the prizes. Rescue Stretcher is very good for that. And 2, I feel like, is pretty minimal. Like, you gotta play at least 2 of them. Then I also play 2 copies of Escape Rope, which I found that I really like as a mobility card in this deck. Escape Rope can help you get around some annoying setup Pokemon like Vulpix, or if your opponent is trying to stall you out with something, or even in the mirror, just if your opponent is using their Latias Prism Star, you could Escape Rope, but a lot of times they will have all GX Pokemon on the bench, which can allow you to target 1 down. And then we play 1 copy of Pal Pad to boot, just to get our supporters back from the discard pile and into the deck. A lot of times just throwing 2 Guzma into the deck could be a game-winning scenario, especially if you have access to Tapu Lele to help close a game out. And that's it for our item cards. Moving on to the energy, we play a huge amount of energy in this deck. We are playing 8 copies of Grass and 8 copies of Lightning Energy. This is just enough that you can always have some, in the deck to attach manually from hand, and also to have some in the discard pile to hit with your Stormy Winds ability. You want to be able to get a ton of energy in the discard pile, especially early, so that you can Stormy Wind. So in order to get that energy out early, you got to play a lot of it. Also, in order to increase your odds of hitting energy off of Stormy Winds, if you don't already have energy in the discard pile, is to play a lot of energy. Also, playing this much energy allows you to really get a ton of mileage out of your Latias Prism Star here, since you will almost always, accelerate 3 or 4 energy with this Latias Prism Star. Having like 4 energy in the discard pile is insane. You're swinging your damage output like 120 by doing that if you accelerate 4 energy from the discard pile with your Latias. And Latias is quite literally a tide changer in this entire deck. You could swing your damage output from being a measly 120 damage if you have 4 energy in play. And then if you hit with Latias, then all of a sudden you're hitting for like 240, right? You literally double the amount of energy you have in play if you could accelerate all 4. That being said, this deck does have some problems, right? One of the major problems of this deck is that we're relying very heavily on accelerating with Stormy Winds, right? So if you happen to prize a couple copies of Rayquaza GX, that could be very bad for you, since we don't have Max Elixir or anything else to help really try and get the momentum going with this deck. Also, prizing or milling your Latias can spell disaster for this list as well. These are just 2 of the inherent weaknesses that I've kind of picked up from my initial testing with this deck. As I have stated already, I am still trying a copy of a version of the deck with Vikavolt. It's going okay so far. There are definitely some games where you set up Vikavolt and the deck just kind of tees off, right? It's incredible. But then there are some games where you don't set up Vikavolt, and then you're not playing things like Energy Switch, you're not playing things like Super Scoop Up. I mean, then you're really kind of just locked in to playing a mediocre deck. So I'm not really sure what's better at this point. I think at a certain point, the damage output and the damage output is better with the Vikavolt version later in the game, right? It definitely ramps up later in the game, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger as the game goes on. With this deck, I feel like you're best off in the kind of like the beginning and the middle of the end. And sometimes scraping together your last knockout can be pretty tough, but maybe there are some other options to consider. I have also considered a third version of this deck, which runs off of Beast Ring and Grass type, maybe Lightning type, Ultra Beast, and Energy Switch, right? So you could include a copy of Pheromosa GX, whose Beauty GX is also an amazing asset, though I have found myself just using Tempest GX a lot, so I haven't really been including an off-type Pokemon GX. I used to have Tapu Koko GX in here, but I found myself in this format just using Tempest GX a lot more, so I'm not exactly sure if Tapu Koko GX is totally needed in this list. I also, like I said, was thinking about Pheromosa GX, the Pheromosa non-GX as well, and then there's the Xurkitree GX and the non-Xurkitree GX as well. And both of those could be played with Beast Ring, right? So you could use just Beast Ring and Energy Switch in this deck. Perhaps you maybe find room for those Pokemon GX there. You take out the 3 Super Scoop Ups, you include 3 copies of Beast Ring, and then maybe you're in business, right? So then maybe you take out as well, maybe you take out like 1 Ultra Ball, but then you need like Ultra Ball to go get your, your Pokemon GX. So maybe you take out like 1 copy of Mysterious Treasure or something, and maybe you take out 1 other card, like 1 Acro Bike. You fit in 2 Ultra Beasts, 3 Beast Rings, and you could play it that way as well. I'm still in the process of testing this deck, like I've said. I think that maybe the Beast Ring could be the way to go, but this is what I've got so far. So anyways, let me know what you guys think of my initial list here in the comments below. Do you guys think that maybe just the Energy Switch Rayquaza way is the best way? Is Beast Ring the best way? Or is Vikavolt the best way to play it? I think all 3 are valid options, and I plan on showing off all 3 here on Tricky Gym, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Anyways, thank you all for watching the video. Make sure to like the video, sub to the channel, ring that bell. Let me know what you think of Rayquaza GX Sun and Moon in the comments below. Peace.